Got a minute or two? We have a way to make it not okay. Welcome to Sinister Minutes. I'm your host, writer and storyteller Kurt Homan. Next to me is the master of macabre musical musings, the maestro of mood, Tim Parker. Together, let us take you on a journey into the dark heart of disturbing. Sinister Minutes. It's not okay. Sinister Minutes features tales that include disturbing content. That's intentional because, like the podcast itself, the creators here at Sinister Minutes are really not okay. Now, having said that, realize that content featured on this podcast may include descriptions of some pretty horrific things at times. It is a dark fiction podcast, after all. So we hope that you are anticipating some degree of abuse and blood, of harm and death, of suicide, of sex, of injury, of mutilation, of pain, and certainly some profanity. Maybe a little bit of screaming, occasionally some threats, a bit of torture, a bit of victim blaming. And as always, at some point, we're sure that you're going to encounter some witches. Don't say we didn't warn you. Welcome! Today's episode of Sinister Minutes is something of a milestone, because this is the episode that brings us up to our first full year. Tim and I got into podcasting just 1 year ago, after another year of talking about it, figuring out what we needed to do, forgetting what we figured out, talking some more, and finally just throwing our hands up in the air and giving it a shot. A year and a few microphones and applications later, we're still at it. Yay us! Today's tale is Going Home, a happy-go-lucky adventure featuring a delightful character who's right on the edge of a discovery about himself. A discovery that just requires him to review a few things about his own history and make some slight corrections. His best friend is right there with him every step of the way, offering help and encouragement and everything else a good friend should offer. Happy-go-lucky? Yeah, right. This is Sinister Minutes. You can go back over the past year's worth of episodes. In fact, we encourage you to do so. But just try to find some happy-go-lucky anywhere in there. If you do, let us know. We're on Blue Sky and YouTube and Facebook, oh my, all under Sinister Minutes. Do you have an original short story of your own? Something you'd like to hear narrated on a future Sinister Minutes episode? Attach it to an email and send it to sinisterminutes@gmail.com. We'll happily take a deep dive into your work and maybe, just maybe, you'll get lucky. After today's story, stick around for some new music. Tim's got a piece for you called Eldritch. What the heck does Eldritch even mean? Well, it's anything that's uncanny, unearthly, or weird in a supernatural way. So, put another way, it's just like your friends here at Sinister Minutes, namely, not okay. Going Home. Written and narrated by Kurt Homan. April. Tom waited at our usual table at Les Amis, his perfect white smile reflecting the flickering candle. He raised his wine glass, toasting my approach. "Jonathan, excellent to see you as always." I slid in across from my old college roommate. Likewise. For nearly 15 years, the two of us had been getting together for dinner. Cafeteria grub wolfed down amid too many all-nighters had eventually given way to an every-other-month occurrence as we segued into our respective careers and marriages, interspersed with a steady back-and-forth flow of text messages and emails. Tom poured a second glass, then pushed the wine in my direction. Without glancing at the bottle, I knew it would be 10+ years old, pricey, a well-rounded vintage, probably Bordeaux. That, like his tailored Dunhill shirt and fancy salon haircut, was quintessential Tom. I flipped open the menu, caught him giving me the stink eye, and closed it again. Fine. I'll wait to hear the table d'hôte." He shook his head. "You never change." I wasn't interested in arguing, so instead elected to turn the conversation back to Tom's favorite topic, himself. Rather than leaving it wide open, I narrowed in on a subject that we'd covered frequently of late. "How's things with Janet?" "Funny you should ask that." Tom swirled his wine, took a sip, and leaned back with a smug, superior air. "Just this past week, I told her I was planning to kill myself." "You what?" I set down my glass and leaned forward. "Is that any way to congratulate your old friend?" He flipped both palms upward. "Congratulate? You... Wait a minute. You actually said that to her?" "Yep." His grin never faltered. "And as of today, I'm a free man." I shook my head. Oh my God. That was how you told her you wanted to split up, wasn't it? What if she'd said, "Go ahead"? What if your once-loving wife had picked up a knife and said, "Here, let me help"? I planned for every possibility. Tom took another sip. But as I predicted, she told me to get away for a while, get some therapy, get my head on straight. Setting down his glass, Tom pressed his fingertips against both sides of his face and jiggled his cheeks up and down. "My head's on just fine. I'm out and away, and it was all her idea." I rolled my eyes. "Congratulations it is, then. Well played, you sneaky little shit." Tom narrowed his gaze, then caught the wide smirk on my face. "Old friend, here's to starting a new life." He raised his glass and clinked it against mine. I savored a sip. "So you're going to meet your goal," I said. "Single again by summer." Tom's admission at our last meeting about wanting out of his marriage hadn't shocked me. Those feelings had been building for a while. "What happens now?" Tom leaned forward. "I've been on that dead-end street for too long." A familiar metaphor. "So you're in reverse." "But keeping my eyes forward." Tom lifted his glass again, but this time he stopped short of sipping, instead letting it linger beneath his nose. "Life sometimes requires retracing a few steps," he said over the rim. "Not whining over past mistakes." He set the glass down and leaned forward. "Work back to the point of decision, then choose an alternate path." "Gentlemen." Our server, a young woman attired in classic black vest over crisp white shirt, set down a covered basket from which rose the aroma of fresh-baked baguettes. "Are you ready to order?" Throaty R's marked her French accent. "Oh, we'll want to hear the specials at some point." Tom leaned back in his chair and looked up at the woman. "But for now, just bring out some of your superb escargot." "Excellent. I will be back." She turned away with a swoosh of her ponytail. Tom twisted and gazed after her as she walked away. Very nice. What's that? I asked. Our waitress. He turned back to me and continued, rather séduisante. Don't you agree? Sure, I said with a shrug. The word was unfamiliar, but the intention was not. I jerked a thumb at my chest. Out of my league and way too young for this happily married man, but she seems to have caught your eye. Happily married? Tom laughed. Ball and chain is more like it. As for me, my eyes have been opened to a whole lot of things. June. Gotta say, you impressed me wanting to come here, I said. The dark wood of our table was distressed. Not because some fancy decorator had decided on that look, but because it had been in service for too many years. How'd you pick this spot? About time we met up someplace new, replied Tom. The old place was feeling pretentious. Bunch of posers there. This, he gestured, his arm tracing a wide arc over his head. It's where we need to be, around real people. I snickered about Tom calling anything pretentious, or anybody a poser. I wasn't sure I needed to be there, but the restaurant at least felt comfortable, although several reviews I'd read suggested that its one-time reputation for fine dining had fallen off of late. The 2 months since our last meetup had flown past. Tom's text messages had been short blasts, snippets about fending off social services people his wife sent to check on him, and of arranging a new life. My responses all strive to remain supportive of his recent decisions. How's the apartment? I asked, recalling some real estate photos he'd shared. And how's this new woman you mentioned when you called? Sherry, right? Shelley. Turns out she was just a fling. I thought we were on the same page, but then last week I came home and told her I'd quit my job. And you know what? Instead of being happy for me, she went all domestic. I'm trying to get back to where I need to be, and she's already trying to tie me down. Tom brushed shaggy-looking hair out of his eyes. Too much like being married. I took a sip of wine, more surprised at the fruity flavor than the news of Tom leaving both his old job and his new girlfriend. Sorry I never got to meet her. Just as well, Tom shrugged. Easier to make a clean break. He caught me staring at him a little too long. What? Nothing. I raised an eyebrow. Just remembering when you thought that position at Apex Solutions was your dream job. Wasn't your whole team there pretty tight at one time? Turned out to be a bunch of backstabbers. He took a long swallow of the cheap wine. They liked me as long as I was addicted to a paycheck, ready to sell my soul for the corporate goal. I nodded. People always show their true colors eventually. You made the right decision. I raised my glass. To better opportunities ahead. As we clinked, I considered the promotion I'd recently landed at work. Better salary and a lot more say in my department. Hard work on my part had paid off. I kept that news to myself. They're lucky, he continued, that I didn't piss on anybody's desk on the way out. Maybe next time, I said with a grin, then pointed at the menu. So what's good here? August. The shiny chrome and bright fluorescence of the diner was dazzling as I slid into the booth across from Tom. What are you doing these days? I can't put my finger on it, but something's different. You look, younger. He laughed, just readjusting, still moving back to that critical decision point we talked about. Once I get there, I'll be cranking forward on a brand new road, traveling in a new direction. He leaned back and gazed at the ceiling, hands behind his head. Gotta tell you, since I hung up the daily grind, I feel younger. In truth, he looked more tired than anything. He was noticeably thinner, his button-down shirt hanging on his frame, and his hair was overdue a visit to a barber. But I wasn't going to be the one to tell him any of that. So, what's next? You've shifted back from a marriage, a job, a girlfriend, and now somehow you're stepping back from your age, too? Don't quite know yet. Tom steepled his fingers. Right now, I'm happy to be with my old friend, enjoying dinner in this fine bistro. The daily specials, chalked on the blackboard above the door, looked promising. I always did like poutine. It's damned good here. That and the meatloaf, if there's any left. I scooted closer. So, what's your next big step? New job? Or something else? Tom leaned forward. I'm going back to school. Full time. My jaw fell open. Wow, that's amazing. Back when we were there, he continued, we took a bunch of classes that didn't mean anything. Now, I want to explore new things, and college might be just the place to do it. I nodded. You can afford it, right? All covered, he nodded. I cashed in a few investments. More steps back. Furthermore, he said with a wink, there's a lot of pretty ladies on campus. Ah, come on, I rolled my eyes. Most of them are young enough to be my daughter. Tom leaned back again, stretched his arms out, and cracked his knuckles. Okay, Mom, I don't have a problem with age if they don't. I couldn't help the glare. The birth of my first child, a daughter, had affected my tolerance for creepy attitudes. A lot. I brought my expression under control a moment later. But I needn't have worried. Oblivious, Tom twisted off the top from a single-serving wine bottle, poured it into a glass, and took a gulp. Okay, guys, what'll it be? Our waitress wiped greasy fingers on her apron, obviously not for the first time, before reaching for her order pad. 2 meatloaf dinners. Tom pushed the hair out of his face again, with loaded fries. October. Jonathan, over here, shouted Tom. Hey! I weaved my way through a maze of occupied red and white checkered tables. Roasting garlic and frying chicken wings permeated the air. I was about to give up on you, said Tom. We agreed to meet at 6. That was 45 minutes ago. Where you been? Sorry, okay? I shook my head. Work asked me to run some figures. I texted you. Corporate lackey, he mumbled. Let's order. I looked up at the menu high above the counter. I'm starving. Me too, said Tom. Hey, Phil, large pepperoni and onion, he shouted to a burly man behind the counter. Beer? Without waiting for a reply, Tom poured 2 glasses, draining the pitcher that had been sitting half empty on the table. I took a sip of watery lager. Gotta admit, there's no predicting where we're going to wind up anymore. Every time lately, it's someplace different. Remember when it was always Les Amis? So predictable. Tom drained his glass in a single gulp. Another thing I did wrong the first time. My whole life, nothing but ruts. No more, he grinned. Spontaneous. That's me now. So tell me, how's the great experiment? Tom slapped his palms on the tabletop, face darkening. This is no experiment. I wondered if I'd pushed the wrong button, but he continued, the alcohol obvious in his now slurred speech. I've gone back in time, living life for the second go-round. He leaned closer. Beats the hell out of the first one. Picking up his empty glass, he tipped the last dregs into his mouth. How's school? I asked. My question had the desired effect. He leaned back and put his hands behind his head. Remember how I used to envy the liberal arts guys because they always had time to party? Well, this time around, I'm one of them. Nice. So, what classes are you taking? I was pretty sure I knew the answer. You paying attention or not? Who gives a shit what I'm taking? Been there, done that. Now, I'm having the time of my life. I'd been right. But you're still trying to pick up all the things you didn't get a chance to before, right? Trust me, I'm picking up plenty of things these days, and some of those things are damned cute. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, then plastered a smile on my face that I hoped looked sincere. Wow, sounds like you're living the high life. Damn straight. I live by my rules now. Tom stared into the bottom of his empty glass. Hey, Phil, another pitcher, okay? And how's that pie coming? December. The park was full of life. Sunday joggers weaving in and out amongst the slower pedestrians. I examined the multitude of faces, part of me wanting to see how he was doing, another part wanting to be home in my new house. Show up later every time we meet, said a familiar voice. Trying to give me a complex? Tom? I turned. He pushed himself up from the grass, using the tree he'd been leaning against for leverage. His jeans were torn at one knee, and his gray hoodie had a stain up the center. He looked as tired and distressed as his apparel, and the scraggly beard did not help in the least. Thought maybe you forgot. I didn't forget, I replied. Hey, what's going on with you? Everything's great. Why? I skipped over the way that the Tom I knew a year ago would have sneered at the homeless-looking guy I was talking to now. You stopped replying to my emails. I tried texting you and got a disconnected reply. Stopped by your place and somebody else's name is on the door. I'm glad you reached out because I didn't know how to find you. Everything's okay. He looked at the ground. I'm staying at my folks' place for a little while, is all. I pulled back in surprise. Thought your dad said he never wanted to see you again. Yeah, we worked some things out. Still don't see eye to eye, but... He trailed off, still focused on the ground. You, taking care of them? Is somebody sick? No, nothing like that. They're both fine. I've got some stuff going on right now. He met my gaze. You know how I've been trying to get back to that point? The one where I left the road I needed to be on? The topic had been part of much of our conversation for well over a year. How's that going? I asked, seeing the answer clearly in front of me. Tom grinned. Maybe a little too well. Every time I think I'm at the point I need to be at, I remember something else from the past that needs to change, so I go farther back. I nodded. You've got to be close now, right? So just a little farther? I don't know. His eyes seemed vacant, unlike the old, ultra-confident Tom. Nothing's felt quite right, so I'm still looking. Remember when we first met? I chuckled. Both of us, still teenagers. You were sure you knew exactly what you wanted in life. Turns out I was already on the wrong path, just didn't know it. Tom's head was moving, but whether it was a nod or a tremor was unclear. Damn it, he said after a pause. I know I'm close. He looked up. Hungry? Sure, I nodded. A little. What did you have in mind? Let's grab a couple chili dogs and hang out here. February. His letter surprises me. I don't recall telling him my new address, and besides, who sends anything through the mail anymore? It's been months since that last meetup, and the one time I stopped by his parents' house, his dad gave me a sad look and told me Tom wasn't talking to anybody. Hey, Jonathan. Ironic, huh? Remember when this all started? How I got Janet to kick me out? I got the divorce papers a few days ago. I think she was holding on to some hope for a while there, but it died out. Maybe it just faded. I've retraced every step of my life. I was so careful. I did it all this time, the way I wanted to, not how I thought I had to. But for all that, I never did find the right path. I pushed back hard, but the choices I'd made earlier, always earlier, held me back. Every time. I figured there's only one more step back to take. All the wrong choices of a lifetime, I'll fix them all. One shot. There's only one road leading forward from there, and it has to be the right one. Hope I remember enough. Hope I remember you. I don't know how long it takes to get reborn. If it's quick, then one day some kid's gonna come up to you and tell you he's made it this time. Believe him. Your old friend, Tom. I set the letter down. It'd be easy enough to find out how he'd approached his own death. I doubt he used a gun or jumped off a bridge. Most likely he'd swallowed a bottle of pills and washed them down with whiskey. Left his body for his mom and dad to deal with. Quintessential Tom. Ironic? It sure is. Each time he took a step back, I took my own step forward. Your old friend? Not so much. There was a time when I actually looked up to him, heeded his advice, listened to his bullshit. I changed my major to a subject that didn't interest me. You need to go into something marketable. Passed by some excellent employment opportunities. There's no future in that. Let the woman I love slip away. You can do so much better than her. It took years to get my life even somewhat back on track. Online courses to pick up the material I should have gotten in college. Starting way too late at the bottom rung in the field I'd always cared about. And while I love my family dearly, a part of me will always wonder about that soulmate I pushed away. Years passed. So many dinners where I barely mentioned my life, and Tom barely noticed. Maybe I snapped a little. Maybe I wanted those years back. And so sometime during our long-standing friendship, I learned to play him. I gritted my teeth while he selected our meeting points, ordered my meals and my wine for me, tolerated him denigrating my interests, my career, my marriage, pretty much anything of mine. But once it began, everything moved faster than expected. It wasn't so hard to sell him on the idea that his life was in a rut, that he needed only to take a few incremental steps back. Then a few more. Watching him throw away everything good in his life as he quested for something unachievable became entertaining. It's so fitting that the last good thing in his life, namely life itself, was the final victim. That pompous ass would never admit I influenced him, but he bought into enough of my suggestions. I planted the seeds, and I fed and watered them carefully. A little more with every email, every text, and of course, every dinner conversation. In the end, he went right where I pushed him to go, all the way back home. Eldritch, composed and performed by Tim Parker. Sinister Minutes is presented by Kurt Homan and Tim Parker. The musical score was composed and performed by Tim Parker. Our production team consists of Kurt Homan and Tim Parker. On behalf of everyone here at the Sinister Minutes podcast, namely Kurt Homan and Tim Parker, we thank you for listening, for joining us as we explore all the ways in which we are not okay. This audio program is copyright by Kurt Homan and Tim Parker under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives license.